Welcome to the Deerwood Realty YouTube channel. I'm John Schenk, founder and managing broker, Deerwood Realty in St. Louis, Missouri. You know, as a YouTube creator, there are times when you see topics that you should shy away from because they're going to cause issues, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to cause any drama in your life. You don't want to be canceled. There's other times where you have to push forward knowing that there's that risk. And so tonight, I might be on that risky side. You can always follow me on Rumble and Odyssey. I don't think what I'm talking about is that controversial, but perhaps it is. You never know with the line. You know, there's community guidelines on YouTube, and those are just guidelines. If they think something, if there's something that some censors see somewhere, you're just not going to be able to get forward. Now, there's two different ways they can do this. They can just get rid of my channel altogether. Actually, three. They can get rid of. They can give me a strike, or they can just shadow ban the video altogether. I wouldn't say that I'm 100% sure that I'm shadow banned, but man, every once in a while I start to think that maybe I am. You know, my content could suck as well. I mean, that's certainly possible. But I just feel like we have a big issue with affordability in the United States, and we have market levers that people are going to be pulling. And I think that we should be aware of what's going on with those levers, and how we should view this stuff. And so with that, I'm going to get into the article. If you're triggered, I apologize. I'm going to talk about it with what I think is an open mind. I don't necessarily agree with everything, and I'll point out those things that I disagree with. But you have to have some sort of critical commentary when people write things on both sides of the aisle. And I know we're a very partisan nation at this time, but my hope is that someday things will work themselves out for the better of everyone. Here we go. That being said, it starts off with a flamethrower. Why Biden's policies are a nightmare for housing affordability. And just right off the bat, I want to say this. Inflation, the massive amounts of inflation, started under Trump. And you say, John, how can you say that? Well, when they closed the government and they decided to just start printing money left and right, that was the start. Now, you can argue that this crisis started in 2008 and was never fully addressed. That's fine. What I'm telling you is I don't think that Biden or anyone else's policies matter in this situation as it relates to his historical perspective. It's bad policy in the United States causing these issues. Biden happens to be the president now. If anyone else were the president, next week, these problems would still exist. So there's my apology, my blanket apology for all those who might say that it's Biden's fault or that it might be someone else's fault. They're all at fault. Okay. So here we go. It says we're entering a stagflationary crisis. There's no way around it. It doesn't matter how much oil Joe Biden pumps on the market from the strategic reserves. It doesn't matter how many jobs he's able to temporarily buy with $8 trillion plus deficit spending. It doesn't matter how many lives or how many times the mainstream media claims we're in a recovery or claim to see the green shoots of a soft landing. In reality, most Americans are struggling to afford necessities. Increasingly, they're simply unable to participate in essential markets. The longer this goes on, the deeper the hole and the harder it will be for people to climb out. Now, look. A couple of things. Number one, economic principles. Prices are sticky. Okay, what does that mean? It means like if you look at gas prices, do you ever notice how they go up, but they seem to go down much slower? It's kind of sticky. So when we see these policies, when we see inflation, as I can't imagine you not seeing inflation. I mean, things are ridiculous at the grocery store. Things are ridiculous at most stores. And I mean, most of your utilities, you're seeing like service increases. Your cable, Netflix, anything is seeing these increases. So, I mean, this is inflation. This is devastating. I have railed against inflation since January of like 4 years ago. I was like, this is not a good plan. And yet here we are. Just a destructive problem. Now, one of the other things that I saw this weekend that I hadn't seen, I saw it in a tweet, and I apologize for not bringing it up, but someone was talking to someone. So it's anecdotal, right? But there's this issue of keeping up with the Joneses, and it's so strong in the United States that it's quite possible that there are many people that are really, really, really towards the end here with their economic policies, their personal spending habits, But we haven't seen it yet. And to be fair, I put out an article just yesterday about how the economy, while you could argue that things are awful, you could also argue based on certain people that things are not bad. Now, if you want to know where I fall, I fall in the things are awful category. Now, why is that, though? Well, I'm a real estate agent, right? And I've seen houses appreciate in value like a tremendous amount in a short amount of time. And I've seen buyers be sidelined in the marketplace and not be able to purchase a decent home for themselves, their family. And then I've seen the inventory that comes on the market being not great. And, I worked and worked and worked and worked for the last 2 years to help people buy homes. You show a house, you put in an offer, you're one of 30, one of 40. It wasn't a fun time. It wasn't enjoyable. And now, just as if someone just turned the spigot, I no longer have to worry about multiple buyers on a weekend and showing houses. Like, things have slowed down dramatically, okay? And I know that this is due to Fed policy. So I am critical of Fed policy because it is affecting me, okay? So just understand I am completely biased because my wallet is hurting. Simply enough. And I think many Americans' wallets are hurting as well. So it goes in to say, this is how economic disasters works. By the way, I put the link to the article in the description so that you have a way to find, so it's not just me going crazy. It says, for most people, it feels like they wake up one morning at the bottom of a pit, barely able to see the sun, wondering what happened. Everything was going fine just yesterday. How do we end up here? For those who pay attention, we can watch the pit get deeper, a shovelful at a time. Granted, we have seen worse conditions in the U.S. in the past. Both the Great Depression and the stagflation crisis of the 70s were truly severe. Okay, now, I'm going into the next sentence because this is kind of one of the things that we've talked about on my shows often. It says, the people who think conditions are bad now haven't seen anything yet. Interest rates eventually climbed to 20% in the early 1980s. Now, it's not me so much, but you will see people say that this housing situation is very similar to the 80s, okay? And so you say, well, that's fascinating. It's not 2008 then? That's not the comparison? And people say, no, it's the 80s. Now, you will get a counter argument from some that will say the affordability now is worse than it was even in the 80s. I find that hard to believe. I mean, even growing up, I was born in the late 70s, okay? And I can remember how things were when I was growing up, and it wasn't, this is not the world we're in now. Just as an example, anecdotal, of course, buying a television, like, they were expensive, okay? They were expensive. You can go get a flat screen TV right now. I suspect probably a 60-inch flat screen TV, probably $200 to $300. So, I mean, there's the ability to buy the craft beer. I mean, there are things that have done well in the economy, right? How many different kinds of beer can you buy now? Back then there were like 4 brands. So, I mean, things have changed. I don't think that this is like the 80s, okay? It says, part of this ongoing problem is the heavy inflation in housing prices. If you notice, I've done an episode of this in the past. I believe the problem is inflation in the prices and not the affordability argument that you hear, okay? So I'm arguing that inflation has taken up the price of the home without really giving you anything, okay? And that it is not an affordability issue in the sense that, okay, I'm going to try and do this small example here. Say a house 4 years ago was worth $200,000, okay? I say it was worth it. It means you could go and purchase it for $200,000. That same house is worth $350,000 today, okay? Nothing has changed in the house, okay? If the rate was 5% at $200,000, okay, and then dipped to 3%, the interest mortgage rate dipped to 3%, okay, and it was $220,000, and now it went to 8%, but the house is still $350,000, you didn't get anywhere, okay? Inflation is what is eating away at the home price. It is not an affordability issue. That is my opinion, okay? Affordability is useless when you have inflation that's just crushing you. It says the current state of the housing market. Rental prices of the average American home have climbed to $2,047 per month. Depending on where you live, that might sound outrageous or it might sound like a bargain. Either way, compared to the average in 2019, it was $1,465. That's a 30% increase in rental prices in the span of 4 years. Know anyone whose take-home pay has risen 30% in those 4 years. Now, look, there's this thing going around on TikTok and Twitter and those places where it shows wages and the price of homes. And on Twitter, there's a community that says they're not using the inflation-adjusted number. And I just don't see the wage growth, okay? I just don't see the wage growth. I've never seen it. I feel like we've been stuck since the 1970s to actually see real wage growth. But this is a feeling, and statistics may prove me wrong. The Fed puts out numbers. If you believe those numbers, wages are increasing. But again, are they increasing because of inflation in the sense that it's just inflation being shown versus like actual wage growth? It says, for apartments, which are generally the lower end rental option, the average cost today is $1,372 a month compared to $1,078 per month back in 2019. That's a 27% monthly price hike on the cheapest form of housing. Know anyone whose take-home pay has risen 27% in the past 4 years? I do not. Now, the argument against both of these is that more supply will come on the market. Okay, they're building more and more units, therefore more supply, which will lower the cost of rentals, at least in the multifamily space. In the single-family space, I used to work as a property manager. I never felt like rents made any sense in that space. I just found them to be odd, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. One house is we would always rent over $1,000 a month. But the occupancy would be like 98%. I mean, it was just amazing. It was very odd. But if you moved that number like $25 or $30 or $50 higher per month, I mean, it would cause a dramatic difference in the ability for people to rent. So that was, 10 years ago or longer. Now I have no idea what's going on in that segment. But it says, we know that no more than 30% of a family's income should be spent on housing. If it costs more than 30% to keep a roof over your head, you're considered overburdened by housing costs. Spending too much on shelter forces us to make tough choices, economizing where we can, cutting back on other categories of discretionary spending. Well, the rent-to-income ratio in the U.S. is now 40%, meaning on average, all households are overburdened. Now, we had the episode, Target says that that they are not seeing a weakening in the consumer. The credit card companies, save for Discover, say that they're not seeing a weakening in the ability to pay debt. So, what is going on? Are we early? I mean, is that the case? Is it just early? Is the worst yet to come? I mean, I'm not looking forward to that. Things are already not great, in my opinion. Maybe you got a raise. Maybe you've got $1 million in the bank and maybe you're earning, 12% on your investments. I mean, maybe you're just doing awesome. But I go to the grocery store and it's just vicious. It's just vicious. It says, what's going on? The price of an average home has soared from $313,000 in 2019 to $431,000 today, an astonishing 38% increase. That puts a home far beyond the income of the majority of American households, pricing out more than 67% of the population. It's not just a price problem. There's also declining availability across the nation. And so on this, yes, this is what I'm seeing. There's just a massive explosion in the cost of a house. And so my younger buyers, have been watching, TikTok, and they've been watching Instagram, and they're seeing like, hey, just buy a house, you'll be a millionaire. But they're not taking the loss of purchasing power into that equation. Okay. They just see the house price goes up. They don't know what's driving it. And it's just sad because there's going to be many people left holding the bag at some point. I can't predict when. And at some point I'll be right. And just like at some point, someone else will be on the other side of that trade to be correct. So Rentals in many areas outside of crime-ridden metro neighborhoods are awash in applications, so much so that a new scam has developed among some property owners requiring upfront non-refundable fees just to apply. These screening fees can climb into the hundreds of dollars for each applicant, and that's the price to even be considered. You're unlikely to get the rental even if you cough up the fee, but you definitely won't get the rental if you don't. That's the way it was 10 years ago where I was. You had to pay a $50 application fee, okay? And we ran your application, all right? If you didn't get the house because your application was terrible, too bad. That's the way it was, okay? It would be unconscionable for us at the time to raise those fees to where we would profit off of them. We literally had to pay, I don't know, like $40 to the service. We had $10 a markup, which is definitely not, the greatest thing in the world, okay? That was not our source of profits. The fact that exists today is disappointing, but should not be surprising because things have just generally gone to hell. There are claims that this trend will soon reverse and that builders are set to flood the nation with affordable new properties. But I seriously doubt it given current conditions. When it costs about the same to build a luxury multi-million-dollar home or a low-rise multi-tenant building, and the profit on the former is several times the latter, what sane builder would opt for affordable housing construction? And that's where I am. I mean, look, development is a huge risk. You can lose your shirt quickly, okay? Why take that risk? Why? No offense to anyone, but you go and build affordable housing, okay? And say at the end of that project, you make $5. You are not getting an award for your $5 that you've earned, okay? People will still hate you because you're a developer. So it's like, what is the point of this, right? Just build something that's profitable. At least I can build again another day. And so the incentives are not well aligned for quote unquote affordable housing. Skyrocketing mortgage rates are pushing more and more middle-class families into the rental market. People who would have been homeowners a few years ago are becoming renters, which makes supply and affordability problems worse. And I've seen it. Are we becoming a nation of renters? Is that something we should strive for? I was uncomfortable with George Bush back in 2006, 2005, touting home ownership as his number one achievement. Not because it wasn't a decent thing. It's great to want to have home ownership, right? But it's not great to just foist that on people, right? It's not great to make the environment in such a way that that people who may not really be able to afford a home are in one. That's why I was a little uncomfortable at that time. So, what can be done about this? I'll rephrase the question. What solutions can be pursued that will have fast results rather than taking a decade or more with minimal effects? The truth is the solutions are simple, but they require actions that some people would consider contrary to their political and business aims. And that's my opinion as well. Is I think, I know this sounds crazy, but if you were elected dictator of the United States, I say dictator and I mean it, you could fix a lot of problems quickly. You would stop a lot of problems quickly. In that solving those problems, you may create other problems, right? I mean, this is the way things are. So the situation's not perfect, right? I would say that the biggest reason why we're having so many issues in our affordability is because the corporations and government have come together. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. You can look up the definition of that online if you'd like. I don't want to suggest anything, any sort of name for it, but there's one out there. Certain interests would do everything in their power to prevent such solutions from being achieved, and that's the ultimate obstacle. It's not only that inflation is rampant and prices are high and supply is low. The great obstacles are the political groups and corporate cabals that will try to stop basic forms from happening to alleviate the crisis. That's right. No one cares about the consumer in this case. They only care about the consumer so that they can spend and spend and spend and spend. Okay, there's not good of the country. There's not good for the consumer. It's what's good for a major global conglomerate's back pocket. That's what it's good for. So here we go. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey. Now, this author proposes things that I will never, ever expect to see happen in the United States. And I do not condone these solutions, but I think it's important to put them out there because it's in the article. Okay, so step number 1, deport all non-citizens. There's an estimated 16.8 million illegal immigrants residing in the U.S. as of 2023, though the real numbers could be much higher. To put this in perspective, only 3 million Gen Z Americans have turned 18 since the year 2000, and I think it's safe to assume that they're going to want to live somewhere. So, do you really think in the United States that they're going to deport 16 million people? Like, do you know the cost of that just for airplanes and trains and buses? It isn't going to happen. And let's be honest, once you've hit the United States, you pretty much just, like, once you get here, you're pretty much here. I mean, you can be deported, but the odds are probably in your favor as long as you set foot in our country. So I don't think that's realistic at all. I don't think that's, I mean, it's just not going to happen. So why propose something that isn't likely? To spur discussion that you're not allowed to have? I don't know. But anyway, number 1, I just don't see that happening. Okay. Number 2, stop foreign purchases of U.S. real estate. This is an action that some state governments are already pursuing, more so in the case of preventing the Chinese government and their corporate partners from buying up property, but this should apply to all foreign buyers. China has already taken this step along with 28 other nations. So think about it. In China, you're not allowed to buy property, but the Chinese can buy property here. Now look, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this. To me, what has happened, okay, in all honesty, is that I believe that there were safeguards in place for a good economy. And what I mean by safeguards is there were like ways to monitor where money was going and how much money was being spent, and how was that close to what people are able to earn. And there to me, there was like some sort of balance, and it's gotten out of whack. Okay. But let's continue. It says, just how big of a solution would this be? Consider roughly 40 million acres of U.S. agricultural land is owned by foreign companies, and foreign buyers purchased over 84,900 homes in the United States in the past year. Yes, higher interest rates are slowing these purchases, but not enough. Now look, I like Croatia. I really do. The Dalmatian Islands, or the islands of Dalmatia in Croatia, are probably one of the beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. I would buy a place there in a heartbeat. I would move there in a heartbeat. If I could figure out a way to make any money, I would do it. But you know what? Not allowed to buy a house in Croatia. Can't own it. So, you know, I don't know. I don't want to vilify the Chinese. I don't want to vilify anybody, okay? I do see it in these terms. Okay, if a Chinese corporation is buying farmland for the purposes of farming, okay, depending on their financial ability, they're going to crush any farmer in the U.S. I mean, look at Smithfield. Look at the pork producer Smithfield. It's entirely owned by the Chinese. I mean, I just like proposing solutions now seems a bit hollow. It seems like we've gone down this path and we're in trouble. And step number 3, according to moratorium on corporate home buying. According to data compiled by Pew, corporations own nearly 1/4 of all homes in the United States. Many disguise themselves as smaller investment groups to muddy the water. That's 25% of the total housing market, controlled by a handful of corporations who can level that housing supply shortage into higher profits for themselves nationwide, and of course, higher rent costs for everyone. I totally believe that the corporate housing thing is a problem. I do not know how to solve it. And let me try to explain it the best way I can. Let's just say it's a beautiful suburban neighborhood, okay? There's a house where an old lady owned cats. Not just like 3 cats, but like 100 cats. And, well, one day the people knocked on her door and found out that, you know, the cats had taken over and she was dead, okay? Do you know what that house is going to smell like? Do you know how damaged the walls are going to be? Okay, this is a nice neighborhood, right? Nice thing. The average buyer that I see now isn't looking for quote unquote sweat equity. They're not looking to go in there and fix up the house themselves. Okay. First of all, it's kind of problematic with a mortgage because you have to technically be able to live in the house to get a mortgage. You know, that's part of the issue. The second part is, you know, if you're a computer programmer, are you really the best carpenter? I mean, should you be working on these things that you may not be well qualified to be doing? I don't know. It's just something I'm putting forth. So here comes an investor. Now they take on the risk of buying this home and they fix it up and then they get a profit for it. I don't really have a problem with that. Now you say, well, what levels will you have a profit? Now, what I have seen personally in my time, in my own subdivision, I saw a house that was dated. The people were old and they were moving to retirement living. Couldn't sell their house. Nobody wanted to buy it for their ridiculous price at the time. Someone did buy it. Let's just say for $180,000. Okay, the people were asking like $220, and it was not even close. Okay, so now someone buys it for $180,000. They put like $40,000 into it and sold it for $320. Now that seems a little bit rich, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? But that's somebody bought it. I know it's crazy, but anyway. Again, if the primary danger in U.S. housing is lack of supply driving up prices, then we must create more supply to make housing affordability. Now, look, this is a different argument than he had before. Okay, but he's saying if. So I'm not criticizing the author. I'm saying it's inflation. The author has said it's inflation earlier. You can argue about the causes of inflation, this being the lack of supply driving up prices. I'm saying that there's so many things into that inflation number that it may not just be lack of supply. We can't compel the market to build more houses for cheaper, and we can't compel home builders to take a loss. What we can do is free up the existing supply and take it out of the hands of people who shouldn't own it in the first place and restrict those groups who are attempting to corner the market. Now, look, if I want, first of all, in a single family rental, I think that the tax structure should be different. I just think that it should be different. I think that there should be a longer, I mean, fix it right tomorrow. You can do a longer period of depreciation. Take it from 30 years to something more. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but I still think that there are ways to fix it that are not against the spirit of the United States. I think that if you do stop foreign purchases of U.S. real estate, instead of saying we're going to tax foreign-owned real estate at a different rate, and if we tax corporate home buying, if you're buying your home in an LLC, you know, a C Corp, anything like that, there's a different tax structure. I think those two things could provide relief without injuring everyone. Because if it's still worth it for a corporation to buy something, they'll do it. Okay. So that's where I'm at on that. Now, Jerome Powell what will happen instead? Jerome Powell has a different plan. And this is sadly true. I believe this. It says the Federal Reserve's plan, at least the plan they openly admit to, is completely different. They're actively attempting to crash the economy and cause untold financial harm in order to drive inflation back down. The same way that zero interest rates and trillions in printed money drive prices up, not just prices of food and gas, but of assets like homes, raising interest rates and bleeding liquidity out of the economy makes prices fall. And I think that's what they've chosen. I mean, they don't control government spending, okay? If you could kind of cut that down, you probably wouldn't have as much inflation. But the Fed does not control that. And so they can only really do what they're going to do. And it's going to be brutal. See, once people lose their jobs, they can't afford food or gas or rent. Remove demand and prices fall. Problem solved. So they're kind of hitting the demand, right? They're kind of hitting demand. We cannot afford an 8% mortgage, okay? Corporations cannot afford to borrow money at 10% or above. That slows down economic growth. Yes, it's the financial equivalent of carpet bombing, which punishes the guilty and the innocent alike. Yes, it will work by pushing the entire nation into a recession so brutal that the only solution is a Federal Reserve intervention. Cue money printing and interest rate cuts, which sets the stage for the next enormous surge in the cost of living. Welcome to the modern economic cycle where your economic well-being is managed by an unelected cabal of academics who've never really had a real job in their lives. And that's exactly the situation. That's exactly the situation. So, will my video be on YouTube forever? I don't know. Will it get a strike? I don't know. I hope not. I'm not advocating for any of those positions. I'm just putting forth that those positions are there. And I think that housing affordability is out of control. I think it's due to inflation. We can argue about what the general inflation, what the reason for that is. But I don't think it's as simple as supply and demand. That's me. What do you think? Put it in the comment section below. Judging from my best performing video, which happens to be about camping, a YouTube channel about camping, I'm not going to answer every single comment if it's just what I think to be as dumb. If you haven't watched the whole video and you write something, I mean, come on, right? So anyway, with that, I'm going to head out. Look, if you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. It'd be great to have you. We're trying to build a community of real people, right? All walks of life, just real people, and who have an interest in the real estate world, in the real estate market, in the real estate media. It's fascinating what you come across daily, and I'd like you to be a part of it. With that, I'm going to head on out. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.